Aloha and welcome to Piko Podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Galdera with Kamehameha Schools Communications. And I hope you and your ohana are doing well as we continue to navigate these unique times. It's been an interesting start to the new year, and hopefully we'll get this episode off to a good start and really give you something to keep you entertained as you make your way through your daily lives. And just as a reminder, this podcast allows us to showcase some of the innovative approaches to education, community building, and leadership, and we give you that through a Native Hawaiian lens. And you can catch all the episodes of Piko Podcast in the Imua newsroom, as well as Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, and Google Podcast platforms. So plenty of ways to check it out. And also remember, you can catch us on the Kamehameha Schools YouTube channel as well. So not only can you listen, but you can watch the podcast as well. So thank you for tuning in. And on today's episode, we're joined by Tommy Waters. He's a 1983 KSK’83 graduate and the current Honolulu City Council chair and presiding officer. Mahalo, Tommy, for joining us today. I really appreciate it.
Hey, aloha, Kyle. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, we appreciate, sharing your mana'o. You have a very busy schedule, so your time is valuable. And let's just start off with, Tommy, telling us about your background and a brief background and how you've navigated your career as a Native Hawaiian and some of the leadership lessons you've been able to develop over the years.
Well, thank you. As you mentioned, I'm a KS grad, class of 1983. Some of the more notable KS grads in my year are Robert K. Kaula, Ron Mizutani, and Lance Wilhelm, who's Board of Trustees. But yeah, Kamehameha Schools had a huge impact on my life. I still remember Ikalasia class with Reverend or Kahu Kaupu. He made us all fill out applications for college. I mean, a lot of us, our parents never went to college, so we didn't know how to do it. And in Ikalasia class, he made us do it and he made us fill it out and he kept reminding us, hey, where's your application? So I have to say, if it wasn't for Kahu, I may not have ever gone to college. Ended up going to UH, which I call the Harvard of the Pacific. I was a political science grad, major, where I actually got to know and love politics. I remember one of my professors making me go down to the Capitol and pick a bill and follow any bill you want, she says, and write a paper, testify on it. And I picked the Hawaiian right to sue. Back then, beneficiaries of OHA and or DHHL, right, didn't have a right to sue the government. And I testified at the bill and I watched how the sausage was made, so to speak. And I thought, okay, I gotta be there someday. And I looked around and all the legislators were lawyers. So I thought, okay, I better go law school. So I did. And interestingly, there was a lot of Kamehameha grads in law school before me, after, and during my time. But I became a public defender for a few years, kind of lost track of my dream of serving in politics. But then I met Billy Kenoi. He and I were public defenders together, and we would sit for hours and talk about politics and how we can make our community a better place and how we should be doing that with the skills that we've learned throughout life. And he ended up moving to the Big Island, working for Harry Kim, and I thought, okay, if that brother can do it, I can do it too. And I decided to run for the legislature, and I represented Waimanalo and Lani Kai, where, as I was mentioning, I actually been to your house, walking door to door. And it was the best experience, just walking door to door in the homesteads in Keolo Hills and Lani Kai, meeting constituents. And I served 6 years in the legislature. And then I had babies, I had kids, I had keikis. And I thought, that's my number one job. And I quit. I didn't run for re-election, stayed out for 10 years. And then my kids got older. Got to the point where my kids, they don't want to hang out with me. I'm not superhero anymore. I still like to believe I am. But, I asked my kids, hey, is it cool if Dad runs for office again? So I decided to run for the city council. And again, just walking door to door, I went through 3 pairs of shoes, puka my shoes, everything, all kinds sunburn, and I was fortunate enough to win. But I'm so sorry. I'm just vola'awing.
No, that's fine.
But yeah, so here I am.
Yeah, so with all that experience, what are some of the takeaways, just some of the perseverance and like you said, your commitment to family and ohana that kind of bring that sense of leadership to your role now?
I always say, right, if our keiki are happy and thriving and healthy, and our kupuna are treated with dignity and respect, and we keep the family units together, and we make life as easy as possible to achieve that, that's my role, right? And so every decision that I make, I like to filter it through how it will affect our keiki, our kupuna, and our families, right? If you think about it, our keiki represent the future, you know? And,
Right.
and I'm the fifth of six kids. I have a sister, Kathy, who is a KS grad, 1975. My brother, Craig, is KS’83. They don't live here anymore. They live on the mainland. My other sisters, Miley, Holly, and Michelle, they live on the mainland too. I'm the only one left. So, every decision we make is does it affect our families? How does it affect our siblings, our kupuna, right? Our kupuna represents our past, our keiki represent our future, but think about that when you make your decision, when you vote on anything that we have to deal with here in the hale. But that comes from my upbringing. We get our values from our teachers, our coaches, our parents, aunties, uncles. And that's really a Hawaiian thing, you know. And Kamehameha Schools has definitely had an impact on my life.
Okay. And let's kind of transition to the world that we're living in today with what I like to call the next normal that's
Mhm.
kind of resulting from this COVID-19 pandemic. How are you and some of your colleagues in the city council coping with all the adjustments that have had to be made, not only from the policy making standpoint, but just kind of living life and trying to keep up the way you were before, but also recognizing all the situations that people are dealing with now with during this pandemic?
I got to give a shout out to my predecessor, Ikaika Anderson, who's also a Kamehameha grad, and he was the chair of the council
Hmm.
um, just prior to me. But we had to lock down the hale, right? We
Yeah.
had security guards at each entrance and nobody could come in. And we had to immediately start, I mean, we couldn't just stop doing business. But through his leadership, we figured out a way, and I'm carrying this on, so that people can telecommute, right? We've talked about this for years. Remember? I mean, just for as far as I can tell, right, from the 1990s, we talked about how we can be creative in getting cars off the road and work from home.
Hmm.
Well, that's exactly what we had to do. So we issued laptops to the staff so that they and a VPN so that they could actually access the city website from home. And I would say about half of the workforce here at the Hale, at least from the legislative branch, are working from home. And you know what? It's working out perfectly. You know, productivity has not gone down one iota, right? At
Hmm.
least for the people that I'm directly supervising. And it works. It works. I've been able to go to neighborhood boards. I got 7 every month. 7. From
Wow.
Kai to Ala Moana. And it's so nice. I can be at home listening with my earpods while I'm ironing my clothes for the next day, cooking dinner for my kids. I don't have to actually be sitting there, right? But I am participating, listening, and being able to converse. And it's working out good. All my meetings are on Zoom now, like this. And
Right.
and at first it was hard to just stare into a screen all day long, but it actually works out. It's pretty good. It's efficient. You tend to just get right to work rather than the niceties of well, which don't get me wrong, the niceties are fine, and I enjoy that, especially as
Hmm.
a politician. But you got to be efficient, and that's really what the norm is now.
Okay. And that's a great way to describe it too, because even as you mentioned, we're doing this podcast over a virtual platform. So it's definitely something to get used to. But like you said, a lot of us are kind of finding that groove and really being productive doing it. So I'm glad you have that to share. But let's transition back to your time at Kamehameha Schools and just as a graduate and as a ōiwi leader, how much pride and honor does that bring to you, knowing that folks not only in school but people in the working class and, like you said, kupuna, can kind of look at what you're doing as an example for carrying on that ōiwi leadership mentality?
Oh, thank you. It's wonderful, especially as you know, we have Esther Kia'aina as the vice chair and Andrea Tupola as the floor leader. The three of us are Kamehameha grads.
Mm-hmm.
And Heidi Tsuneyoshi is not a Kamehameha grad, but she's a Hawaiian, and her children went to Kamehameha. I mean, it's just so wonderful. We used to get teased that Kamehameha grads are police officers and firefighters, and it's just simply not true, right? We got doctors, lawyers, architects, and every walk of life. And it's just so wonderful to see that. It's wonderful to see, like my classmate, who is a Bishop of State trustee, or Kamehameha Schools trustee. I mean, Lance Wilhelm.
Right.
It's just so wonderful. But for the grace of God and our blessed Princess Pauahi Bishop, a lot of this would never have happened. It would never have happened, certainly not in my life, unless I had the opportunities afforded to me by Kamehameha Schools.
Okay, and you alluded to it with Vice Chair Esther Kia'aina and Floor Leader Andrea Tupola. Was there ever a point after everyone got elected and everyone settled into their roles where maybe you've been able to sit down and really think like, wow, this is great that 3 Kamehameha Schools graduates are having this sort of impact on, such a thriving city and county with so many things that need to be done and really having such a meaningful impact?
Well, it actually started during the elections. I've encouraged young Hawaiians and other Kamehameha grads to run for office. I mean, this is all of our kuleana, right?
Right.
If we put the decision-making responsibility on others rather than ourselves, then you have to live with what decisions are made. And really, that comes back to why I ran for office. So when I see other Hawaiians, and especially Kamehameha grads, running, I think it's wonderful, and I think it's great, and more Hawaiians should be running for office. So it started back from the elections when we saw both young and of all ages actually seasoned folks running. Exactly. It was really, really nice. So then when Esther and Andrea both got elected, it was just great. But it was kind of fortuitous because when you're organizing leadership, you try to talk to everybody and you give everybody the benefit of the doubt and figure out who's going to be your leader. And it just turned out this way, that the 3 of us happened to be in leadership. And I sat back after it happened, I'm like, hey, this is great. It kind of just came that way based on our personalities. But then what we had in common were the fact that we were all KS grads.
Right. Okay. And I'm glad you brought up the point about the elections, because the last time we chatted was back when Tehani Malter, who's another recent KS graduate, was elected to the neighborhood board out in the Hawaii Kai area. And, that was back before COVID, so we could actually have that ceremony for her out at Kapolei in the city hale out there. But how impressed are you with somebody like Tehani and all the other young ōiwi leaders that are taking that step to take on a leadership role and really, try to make a generational change that way?
So impressed. Tehani was, I think, the youngest person ever elected to the neighborhood board system. And she was elected while she was in high school, I believe, or she was running while she was in high school.
Right.
But the election occurred afterwards. But no, she's great. And I see her once a month at the Hawaii Kai neighborhood board, and she's doing great. In fact, I think I filmed a podcast with you folks encouraging other folks to KS grads to run for your neighborhood board. I started at the neighborhood board level too, back in, the early 80s, I think. I
Okay.
ran for the Kailua Neighborhood Board, and just what a great experience. Like I said, you know, we need to be in control of our own destiny, and and part of that is being in a decision-making position, and you got to run, you got to participate, you know.
Okay.
Democracy only works if you participate.
Right. So speaking of participating, and without getting into the nitty gritty of politics and some of the contentious angles of it, what are some of the issues that you and your cohorts would like to address and maybe, look at changing or making policies around that really affect and benefit Native Hawaiians?
Well, as you know, as a city council member, I represent everybody, right? And as
Hmm.
the chair, I represent the entire island. But yet, I really believe that if we can make Hawaii, Oahu more affordable, right? The cost of living is astronomical. I alluded to this. I have 5 siblings, and I'm the only one still left here. And my siblings can't afford to live in Hawaii anymore. My
Hmm.
parents, my dad was a St. Louis, he went to St. Louis High School, grew up in Kalihi. He ended up moving to the mainland, and my mom, and they both passed away on the mainland. And that just breaks my heart to think if my Kiki aren't going to be able to afford to live in Hawaii. So, how do we make it more affordable for our local residents to stay in Hawaii, to work and have good paying jobs, right? So coming back to that, affordable housing is a big deal. There's a lot of luxury apartments coming up in Kaka'ako and in the Ala Moana transit-oriented development, TOD areas. And
Hmm.
gotta hold these developers' feet to the fire. Like, hey, you want to just build luxury, and guess what? These are luxury condominiums for people who don't even live here many times, right? They just park their money here in Honolulu because the property taxes are low and they know their property value is going to go up. So one of the things I want to do is make them, for every floor that we're giving them, every foot that we're giving them in height and density to build these luxury apartments, I'd like to have them build one for one, if at all possible, right? Affordable, so local people can live there. The whole
Right.
idea of transit-oriented development is to build housing around the rail station so that people can use the rail.
Right.
And if we're not building for local people, then it doesn't make sense to me. Why are we even doing it, right? It has to be to benefit local people. So that's a big deal for me, right? Building more affordable housing. And when you talk affordable, we should talk affordable, right? Because we use this in my mind, this unintelligible for most people. Um, I guess, what would you call it?
It's like a formula, right?
It's a
That
formula.
expresses what is affordable and what isn't.
Yeah, they call it AMI, so area median income, and they go 100%, 120%, 140%. So what they define as affordable is between 120% and 140% AMI. So most local people are like, what are you talking about, right?
Right.
And I make a point when I ask the developers and they talk all this, I call it developer talk. You know, Developers have their own language, just like doctors have their own language, lawyers have their own language. But my job is to break it down so regular people can understand what that means. So I ask them, how much money you gotta make to be affordable in this 120% AMI? And for a single person, you gotta make over 100 grand a year. So how many
Wow.
jobs in Honolulu? It's certainly not at the city county level. How many of these jobs actually pay that kind of money so you can afford a house like that? Even on dual incomes, it's simply not affordable. So you got to break it down. It's more like 60% AMI. I mean, certainly as a council member, that's what we're making, anywhere from 60 to 80% AMI.
Hmm.
So you're really not building these homes for local people. So one thing I'm trying to impress upon my peers is that, hey, look, when we approve these projects, let's approve it to make sure local people um, are benefiting from this. Because after all of our taxpayer money is going to put in the sewer and water and utilities and things like that, making it available. So, local people should be benefiting from that.
Yeah. And let me just add that as a Kamehameha Schools platform, I have to give a shout out to our commercial real estate development arm of the organization, because they've kind of taken it upon themselves to, when they do a development project, they've gone above and beyond the kind of established threshold for affordable units. So that could be a model for other developers to follow, instead of kind of sticking to that really low percentage, is try to, like you said, almost do a 1-for-1, or at least kind of like a half situation, something like that.
No, it's true, and I'm working with the Kamehameha Schools on a lot of projects, and so far they've been wonderful as far as building for local people,
Yeah.
right? And they get it, the idea, you want to live, work, and play. So it's mixed use. It's not
Right.
only just housing and affordable housing at that, but in Europe they do that. You have like what they call like a square, where in the square you not only have housing, but you have your pharmacy there. You have a little sundry store there. You have things that you need, so that you don't have to go far away and get in a car and drive. You can get it right there. And that's kind of like the new model. And I think Kamehameha Schools is looking at that in their Waipahu project, in their UH project, the Pucks Alley project, and even downtown. And I think they have a bunch of other projects. Dillingham Boulevard, in fact, I'm meeting with some of the Kamehameha School representatives to talk about the TOD along Dillingham. That's going to be super interesting. And I think it's something that we need to work together to make it work.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll keep on top of those projects that are coming on board soon. But as we wrap up today's edition of the podcast, Tommy, what are, just if you can leave us with some words of wisdom or encouragement for our viewers and listeners that might be, interested in going into public service one day. Like you said, you found that calling. And even though you took a bit of a hiatus for your ohana, you've come back to it. So what would you want to impart on our viewers and listeners?
Politics is something that's so important to us all. It's all of our kuleana. The word politics shouldn't be a bad word. If you think about it in a positive light, just think of the possibilities and things that you can achieve with putting your minds together and being in a position where you can make a difference. And that's really what it is, right? I mean, you can just put your heads together and think about what's important to us, what's important to Hawaii, what's important to Oahu, and get it done. Like, just don't give up. I've been, Billy Kanoy passed away recently, and he was a good friend of mine, and I'd like to quote him for a second. He always said, if can, great. If no can, still can.
Yeah.
All you gotta figure out is how can, right? Every problem there is a solution. You just got to work through it, around it, and over it, but get to the point where we can solve it. And sometimes, it can be frustrating when your government says no can. And I have to tell you, when Mayor Blangiardi put forth his cabinet members, and I had a chance to address all of them at the same time in a room, and I said, guys, let's be the city that says yes, that we can do this, that we can achieve great things. We just put our minds to it, This is a hard job, and you get beaten down a lot. But you got to just have that attitude that, no way, I'm not going to give up. I'm not going to give up, right? It comes real quick, though, being an athlete at Kamehameha, and then later a canoe paddler. Like, you got to have that grit to just work through any problem, Paddle Molokai, right? You don't give up. You don't stop paddling in the middle of the channel. You bury that blade deep and you pull all your might, right?
Yeah.
So same thing with politics, man. You just cannot give up. Somebody tells you no. How come?
Why not?
Why? Just fight through it. Ask questions and keep fighting. But hey, aloha to you, Kyle. I really enjoyed talking to you, and I look forward to doing this again.
Yeah, this was great, Tommy. Mahalo for your time. And I just want to remind our listeners to check us out on social media through the various Kamehameha Schools social channels and also on YouTube. And you can catch the podcast at ksbe.edu/Imua News in the Imua Newsroom. And also keep an eye out for the spring edition of Imua Magazine, because we're going to have an in-depth feature with Tommy as well as Andrea Tupola and Esther Kia Aina, really talking about that KS connection on the city council. So again, for Tommy, I'm Kyle. Take care and aloha.